Brand identity is crucial for good design, and without it we wouldn't be able to immediately recognise the correlation between products and their designers. We see this a lot in fashion, and even close to home we see this in gaming, Razer's bright green for example. Brand identity and strong design language is one thing that's keeping me excited for future high-end custom releases within the keyboard hobby, and the Gehirn by Baionlenja is a great example of this. So first today I want to look at why brand identity may not be that prevalent in the space, before we dive into the design and lore behind this masterpiece, with the help from a few friends.
I think it's often the first experience people have with your product as well. It's like the brand. And so I think it's really important to like communicate who you are through that, and it helps kind of ground, I think, a product in reality really. So I feel like it's super key to anything you're making, yeah.
As this hobby is predominantly led by enthusiasts, it makes sense that brand identity hasn't particularly been something that's at the front of everybody's minds when designing keyboards. People just wanted certain characteristics, certain designs, colours and mounting styles, so they designed them and ran group buys for them. And don't get me wrong, I've once still loved the small run boards of the space, obscure anime references and the flurry of K-pop boards around. Sick. But this deep into the hobby, we've garnered a large number of design studios, brands running continuous cohesive boards that cover the spectrum of layout options. As the price of quality customs continues to fall, and we see more and more easily accessible boards in this price range hit the market, we're likely to continue to see a drop in the number of independent group buys that are being run. And it makes sense, right? Like, why would you wait 6 months to a year for a keyboard when you could get the same quality, premium mounting styles, and everything else in between for a fraction of the price, and you don't have to wait anywhere near as long? Well, one of the major things that's going to keep me at least, interested in high-end custom keyboards going forward are the choice of design language for each release. And this is where Baionlenja fits into this. Baion's brand identity was something that first had me hooked over 6 months ago when I picked up a Bios R2 unit with music references that really hit the Aphex Twin fanboy part of me. To quote Baion directly, there's no clear way to define it. Maybe biopunk meets Y2K. You see the Y2K elements throughout promotional material like posters, as well as the colorways offered for this release. This actually has been a running trend from past designs such as Synovia, which offered similar colours and design-wise had a very interesting, more futuristic vibe to it. The biopunk elements, in a sense, have been quite prevalent for quite some time. This is seen through old promotional material on his YouTube down to the genetic vault boards that were offered on his site that offered interesting new combinations and finishes of boards like the Bios as well as the EX23. I really like all the custom recent made in Finland boards, from the flame patinaed OBJ1 to the dark alloy EX23 that looks like it was straight out of a dystopian villain's lair. I also really like the interesting engravings that are being used. This adds a little more depth to a design that is otherwise quite simplistic. Speaking of interesting, I think it's time we have a look at the Gehirn itself. As important as the aesthetics are when talking about this board, that doesn't mean that the design choices have not been made with a specific purpose in mind, relating to both sound and feel of the board. The board screams Korean custom from the offset, featuring the original 9-point top mount for the plate along with the logo above the arrow cluster and a pretty standard box and wedge side profile. The board takes this rather flat concept of the OG custom and adds depth that has never really been done before in this hobby, an alternate timeline where customs went a different direction. If we first look at the interior of the board, the use of screws as eyes for the Gehirn figure is pretty damn cool, combined with the use of the internal viewed portion of the weight as the mouth. I love the use of screws for aesthetics in keyboards. I always like the use of them in weight modules of old Matrix customs, and the use of them from a functional perspective on stacked acrylic boards added a little extra something to how they looked. Now the bottom of the board's probably what's intrigued people the most. The fake seam on the bottom is very TGR-like, but adds depth to the bottom through panel lines that allow the illusion of a weight extending out far closer to the edges of the board than should be possible. Now the weight itself. This was something that I was really keen to see how it would actually be executed, and honestly, with it in hand, this thing is stunning. The details on the fossil really made it look like it's actually a fossil. With the closer you view this thing, the more depth you get from the design. I'm really intrigued how this was actually done, and although, you can't see the weight when the keyboard's down on the desk, It's definitely one of the craziest weights I have on a keyboard ever in my collection. One of my other favourite things about this board is how Baion managed to make a screwless exterior, but does this while still managing to use larger M3 screws for closure. The aptly named Baion bolt adopts a similar closure method to other screwless boards, whereby gaps in the plate allow for a section where the top case can be fastened to the bottom case without having to have screws visible on the bottom of the board. The difference here is that this utilises the larger M3 screws, doing so by having each screw secure at a 45-degree angle. This is a great way to hide the screws once the caps are on and doesn't interfere with the switches nor require anything else to allow the board to have that sleek screwless exterior. Not so much of a thing now we have ball catch closers and magnetic connectors for PCBs in the hobby, but still a pretty cool adoption of screwless if you ask me. The Gehirn wasn't actually the first board to use this. I remember seeing it in the Synovia trailer video and was actually the reason I started following the brand's designs. Weird how things come full circle sometimes, huh? Like the Baion bolt, Baion has also included implementations in previous boards that offer functionality not seen elsewhere. Things like grooves on the base of the bias boards were done to allow flex from the PCB without shorting the PCB. It was also, in my opinion, a strong choice aesthetically and added an extra premium feel to the board looking at it from an unbuilt perspective. Although for the most part the interior portion of the Gehirn is purposely quite plain, I love the inclusion of the Baionlenja logo in the bottom right. The intentional placement means that when unbuilt you can see it perfectly peeking through the arrow cluster. In his latest designs, Baion's managed to create this extremely cohesive ecosystem, linking board designs with both promo material and lore, and you guys know I love a bit of lore. As I've already mentioned, the Y2K aesthetic is prevalent throughout the promo posters for Gehirn, as well as the desk mats that have been teased over on his Discord. The overall theme for Gehirn is actually existential horror. If that wasn't obvious from the HR Geiger and clinical core vibes of the promo materials themes, I'll link the document that explains the lore story of Gehirn in a bit more detail down in the description. So if you're interested after the video, please go have a look. But to give you an idea behind it, a fossil was uncovered that turned out to be alive, and researchers utilised a device to generate a live MRI feed of the creature's brain while sedating it due to previous fossil structures causing damage to storage facilities. During sedation, it was discovered that the creature's brain tissue regenerates, providing windows to observe the creature's memories. I don't know about you, but that sounds like a prime opportunity for more keyboards and desk mats. As with the music disc that was offered with the bias, the Gehirn is set to come with a retro-style video game showing the Baionlenja Corporation facility that the Gehirn creature is brought back to. There is also a load of different cool visuals to give more context to the board story, like the brainwave visualizer session described in the lore story, as well as some ambient tracks and some lighter breaks for the Gehirn theme. I like that the PCB also follows this storyline, displaying anatomical drawings as well as the keyboard hard case itself. The design on this thing is not something I was expecting at all, but it is super sleek and it provides this cohesion across all the items that come with the Gehirn's release. I think this cohesion is great to see in the space, linking products together for those who want to push a specific aesthetic in their setup. Brand identity is something that you yourself might not care about at all. You might not like this board at all, or you like the features it offers from a mechanical keyboard design perspective without caring about any of the backstory, and that's completely fine. But I think it's nice to see in the space adding another layer to the hobby that people can resonate with further, linking in their interests and other hobbies from outside of mechanical keyboards. There's a reason we got so many anime themed caps now, right? And I mean, that really sums up what Baionlenja is as an entity. A culmination of Baion's interests and passions, all the visuals, music, renders, designs, all done by him, accompanying the keyboard designs that are at the forefront of it all. I'm not exactly much of an artist or designer myself, but I love learning new things, and keyboard design and rendering out scenes on Blender has been a recent obsession of mine, so I definitely have a newfound respect for those who are rendering and designing boards in the space. But I feel like I've talked about this board long enough now, so it's time for a sound test. Now, the board from a sound and feel perspective is great. Clacky top mount goodness with resonance you would expect in a board that takes so much inspiration from Korean customs, without having any real hollowness or ping. I built this with my personal favourite switch, which is the OP Black, and it was also designed after the original Nixie, so quite fitting for a vintage-ish inspired board. I'm really hoping someone picks up the pink colourway and pairs it with GMK Symbio. Brand identity is something that we aren't really seeing on this level in the hobby elsewhere. That's not to say it isn't prevalent in the hobby in its current state. Design studios and other designers have been pushing their own stylistic agendas for ages, from household names in the space like AI03 to powerhouses in the budget scene like Quality Keys and their subsidiary Neo lineup. I love that Baion seems to have found his style with his latest boards and how this pairs with other things like desk mats to really bring the whole vibe together. I look forward to seeing how this aesthetic evolves with future designs down the line, how the lore story of Gehirn links to future projects, and overall seeing what crazy new things he puts into his boards.
You know, even for me, when I think about like what I want to make, I'm always thinking like, you know, how do I make things that like, you know, even like with the Gestalt hat, like how do I just put this brand in other places and experiment, or like how can this thing look good on a coffee table or on a shelf and not just on a desk, like yeah. So yeah, I think there's a lot of space for that in the hobby. I think there's definitely not saturated.
Now, that's all I had on brand identity. I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If you have, make sure to subscribe and leave a like on the video down below, and let me know your thoughts on the board in the comments. Big thanks to those who helped me with today's video. All their details will be linked in the description as well. For all details of the board's release, I have linked both Baion's and ClickClack's Discord in the description. Thanks for watching, and I will see you nerds in the next one. Peace.